I'm incredibly lucky and blessed that I have been able to find, that I was able to find my passion. It really is my dream job. I literally thought I invented it. It was actually a thing. And it does help even when I'm having a really rough time at work, or I'm so overwhelmingly busy, or the times in the beginning of my practice when I was so slow and just worried about starting up a practice. Every day I walk into work, I'm happy to be there because I'm doing literally what I love to do.
All right, that was just a quick excerpt from the conversation today with Dr. Pinkleton. I just wanted to have a little bit of video intro. So here we are on the longboard, but Dr. Pinkleton talks about how she actually found her way onto the path that she's on, that she's so passionate about, and really has a ton to say about just general health advice as well as how to handle the current situation we're facing right now. Welcome, Dr. Pinkleton, to the show.
Nice to be here.
It looks like you're in a beautiful backyard. You've got some sunlight behind you.
Yeah, I'm on my back porch right now.
So, just for a little bit of context on our conversation, we met like a year and a half ago through when I was just becoming a photographer, and you were pretty early on in starting your practice as a naturopathic doctor in Seattle.
I had just moved my practice from Everett down to Seattle.
Okay, so I want to talk kind of through all your journey of everything that you've done professionally and also some of your passions. But first, let's go back to like you as a kid, your background, what you were passionate about growing up, and then how that seed or, your passions kind of took you towards the path that you're on now.
Okay. Well, growing up, I actually, I didn't really know. Looking back now, I can tell that I was very interested in medicine and holistic medicine, but I didn't really clue in on that until much later on in life. My mom is a midwife, so we grew up being kind of crunchy granola. And I would always look through all of her old like herb books and vitamin books and that type of thing. But I was very much focused on law and politics. I have a lot of lawyers and people that work in county administration in my family, and not a ton of scientists. And I think I'm the first doctor in my family. So I didn't quite understand that passion for science that I had. I just thought, I like school, Mm-hmm. So when I went to college, I ended up settling on a pre-law degree, and I was going to go into law school and do that. And I was really excited. I wanted to still help people and go into like immigration law or work for a nonprofit for people who couldn't afford legal counsel, that type of thing, or maybe be a district attorney, that, appointed attorney for people. But then when I was finishing up my senior year of college, I was working at a bar, as a lot of college kids do. And it was this bar in downtown Richmond. I went to Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia. And it serviced a lot of lawyers that would work down in the courts. And I swear, like 20 of them all told me not to go to law school and that it was terrible and that I would hate it. And I got a bird up. Yeah, a little robin up there. I started to really think about that. And when I graduated, I realized I don't know if I actually want to be a lawyer, because every lawyer I meet is miserable and exhausted. And so I decided to take 2 years break from school. I knew I was going to do a graduate program. I've always been very academic and I loved undergrad, absolutely loved it. So I thought, let me take 2 years off to, just kind of experience the world, and I'll figure it out as I go along. So I decided to start interning at a couple of organic vegetable farms in the country, the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, because I thought, like meals, yeah, you should know about growing your own food.
For sure.
And I thought, well, maybe I want to do something like that. About 6 months into it, I was visiting my mother for a long weekend, and I had a total breakdown of like, what am I doing with my life? Like, I don't want to be a farmer. I don't want to take 2 years off. I've got this pre-law degree. It was a philosophy major with a minor in the philosophy of law. What am I going to do with this philosophy degree? Like, really, what can you do? And to back it up a little bit, all through college, I had really started to get into learning about quote unquote natural medicine, herbal medicine, nutraceuticals, which are vitamins and minerals and how they help the body. And I got into that because I didn't have health insurance, and I had some chronic health conditions that I was learning to treat on my own through using the products available to me at my local health food store, because I could not afford to go to the doctor. This was way back before the Affordable Care Act was even thought about. So as I had been learning all of these things and coming up with these amazing discoveries about, change your diet, and then all of this changes, take this herb, and then this chronic condition you've had for 10 years starts to resolve. I'd been somewhat proselytizing natural medicine and holistic medicine to my friends and my family and pretty much anybody that would listen. So I had been getting more into recognizing that passion within myself. Mm-hmm. So fast forward, freaking out in my mom's living room. I was like 21 at this time. And she said, Tressa, I want you to go in the other room and I want you to just like meditate for 10 minutes and create your dream job. Like, if you could be anything in the world, what would you be? And if it doesn't exist, I want you to invent it and come back and tell me what it was or what it is. And I went, okay. So I went in the room and I did that. And I came back out and I said, Mom, if I could be anything in this world, I would be that person people would come to when they were sick. I would help teach them how to get themselves better through natural ways instead of pharmaceutical ways. I would teach them how not to get sick so much anymore. And they would actually listen to me. I'd been doing all that other stuff already, but nobody wanted to give me the time of day. And she said, well, that's simple. Become a doctor. And I went, what are you talking about? I would be totally ostracized in medical school. I would hate it. They would be, penicillin, erythromycin, and I would be over here like echinacea, vitamin C, and it would be a horrible experience. I'd hate my life. Like, do you not know me? What are you doing? And she said, no. Become a naturopathic doctor. And I think my exact words to her were, a natural what? Because I lived in Virginia, and at the time, and still actually to this day, naturopathic doctors aren't licensed in Virginia. It was more of a West Coast thing, and since this time has really taken off across the country. But the Southeast is going to probably be the last to license us. So I'd never heard about it, and my mother had heard about it because she's a midwife, and so she's already well steeped in, alternative or non-conventional medicine, right? So she had me look it up on my computer, and I ended up on our national organization's webpage, and there was this little button up at the top that said, what is a naturopathic physician? And I clicked on it, and I kid you not, on that page were the words that had just come out of my mouth. A naturopathic physician is a doctor who teaches their patients and empowers them to use non-pharmaceutical medication to help heal themselves and prevent further illness. They're licensed, they accept insurance in many states, and so on and so forth. So that 2-year break I had intended had turned into a 6-month break. I think when I went back home that week, I applied to community college to do all of the pre-med prerequisites that I didn't have to take as a pre-law undergrad, right? So I was in school for another 2.5 years before I could apply to Bastyr University, and then I got accepted to Bastyr, and I was in Bastyr for 5 years, and now I'm in my 5th year of practice.
You just told such a succinct and incredible story. I'm over here taking notes. There's so many different things that I want to ask you about inside of that, and it's just great to have context for what drives you and how you've kind of followed the path that you're on, and I think from here the conversation will make a lot more sense, and yeah, so many great things to ask you about. I found it interesting how a lot of what I talk to people about on this interviewing people is like, how do you find your path? Like, what is your passion? How do you find it? How do you identify it? And then how do you actually go after it? And I've just found that if you do those things, you naturally find yourself happier, find yourself waking up with a smile on your face, at least for myself and a lot of the people I've talked to. And I can just feel the positive energy coming from over there.
Yeah, I really agree with you. I think that I'm incredibly lucky and blessed that I have been able to find, that I was able to find my passion. It really is my dream job. I literally thought I invented it. It was actually a thing.
Yeah.
And it does help, even when I'm having a really rough time at work, or I'm so overwhelmingly busy, or the times in the beginning of my practice when I was so slow and just worried about starting up a practice. Every day I walk into work, I'm happy to be there because I'm doing literally what I love to do. And I have an incredible fortune to be able to do that. A lot of people don't have the luck that I had with coming up with what their dream job is and then being able to actually go out and obtain that, right?
Very, very true. So, and that constant reminder of like kind of having a purpose behind what you do that's what's going to get you through those hard times. I've just heard and experienced from myself, like everyone's going to face some sort of challenge. And if you're not passionate about what you're doing, then it's going to be hard to stick with it.
It's really hard. Yeah.
I want to ask you how you actually envisioned, like how those words came into your head when you were meditating in that room for 10 minutes. Like, it seems like what a pivotal moment in your life. Like, what if you had gone in there and meditated and some other words had come in your mind? I guess it makes sense because that's what you were passionate about. But how did you actually, and then kind of the second part of the question is, how did you actually take away all of the societal and pressures from people around you that are telling you to be a lawyer, a doctor, go on the path that you're on? A lot of people feel pressure to just stay on the path. That's how it was for me.
Yeah.
How did you take that first step?
Well, I think, the first part of your question, how I came up with those words, I was just answering a question. If you could, I think my mother gave me the permission, like, invent it if it doesn't exist, and I was in a very acute emotional state at that time where I, feeling really desperate of what the hell am I doing with my life, and so I wanted her help, and she told me to invent a job, so I did it. Like, I'm just gonna really go out on a limb and say the wildest thing that is the thing in my heart, and we'll see what happens, right? I literally have nothing else to lose. And then as far as the societal pressure, I think that it helps. I've always been very independent. I'm very rebellious, much to my parents' chagrin. And I grew up in a pretty alternative lifestyle anyway, so I was used to, and in a way, prideful of the fact that I kind of always went against the status quo. So it wasn't that much of a leap for me or stretch for me to just continue doing so.
Okay.
And it wasn't so much that my family, I did grow up hearing you're going to make a great lawyer, that kind of thing, but I was very passionate about law also. I still am. Mm-hmm. So my family just I have a very supportive family. They just want me to be happy. And when they saw that what I was doing wasn't making me happy, they wanted me to correct that. So, lucky in that sense as well.
That's great. That's awesome. They support you. A lot of folks don't have family that sees that as the most important thing. So that's awesome. I want to go and just establish a little bit of context. I've heard your spiel at BNI a couple times, the networking group that we met at, and how you tell stories and kind of talk about where naturopathic medicine differs from traditional medicine. And you touched on it just briefly, just by talking about your past and your passion. But what is the difference? Like, if someone just asks you, like, what's the difference between naturopathic medicine and conventional?
Yeah. So here's how I explain this. I tell people, because if I say what's the difference, we can be talking here for like 3 hours, right? So let's talk about what I am. So I'm a licensed primary care physician, right? And I received the same type of training as conventional medical doctors received when it comes to the science of the human body, physical exam skills, and diagnostic capabilities. That's pretty much where it ends. Where my training there is really veer off from one another is they focus a lot more on pharmaceutical medication, emergency medicine, and higher intervention specialties like gastroenterology, nephrology, all the ologies, right? And that's because MDs, for the most part, work in hospitals, and that's why you go to a hospital to see a specialist, to go to the ER, to use those higher force interventions, okay? I learned quite a bit about those things. I can prescribe most drugs here in the state of Washington. I know some emergency medicine, and I have enough training to know when I need to refer my patients to specialists. But that aside, I have extensive training in botanical medicine, diet and lifestyle intervention, nutrition, nutraceuticals, which are vitamins and supplements, exercise medicine, physical medicine, and counseling. And I tend to draw upon those tools before I go reach for my prescription pad. Now, another thing that differs NDs from medical doctors, for the most part, is the ideology of health and wellness. And I'm saying this as a person who admits I'm not trained as a medical doctor, so this might not be 100% accurate, but from what I understand of conventional medicine, they view disease and illness as things that just happen to the body. Like you're just walking along and you get a disease, develop it. Okay. And then their way of dealing with the disease, for the most part, they have started to shift a little bit in the past 10 years, is to fix the symptoms, stop the symptoms of the disease. And you do that because you can't help that you have the disease. It just happens. So let's just control the disease through symptom suppression. Okay. The ideology I was trained under is that health is something that happens to you. It is the natural state of our being. And when we are experiencing symptoms of illness or disease, that is the body's way of expressing to us that something is wrong. And instead of suppressing those symptoms, let's try to alter the terrain of the body, the state of being of the person, so that the body, and watch the symptoms, see how they respond to our interventions, so that the body can self-correct back to health, because health is the natural state of order in an organism.
Yeah.
Those are the very different paradigms under which medicine can function under, and often what leads to kind of the butting heads of my profession and conventional professions, just that we literally don't understand one another.
Mm-hmm. I remember you using the therapeutic triangle as like a diagram for kind of explaining the concept that you're talking about. So maybe just paint that picture verbally a little bit on what that is.
Yeah. I don't have it quite in front of me. So we call it a therapeutic order, and it's a way that we can kind of build upon our therapies. And at the base of that pyramid is always establish the basis for health. So if the person isn't eating well, or if they're not sleeping, or if they're living too toxic of a lifestyle, whether that be overconsumption of alcohol, exposure to chemicals on the workforce, that kind of thing. Establish health, start to self-correct that, and kind of hand in hand, but on the next order of therapy is remove the obstacles of cure. So you take those toxins out, right? You take out all the excess sugar. Then you give the body the necessary building blocks for health. So adding in nutrition. Right.
So it doesn't make sense to start adding in supplements and nutrition if you haven't established.
Sometimes you can add in supplements. Uh-huh. Yeah. Correcting or reestablishing structural integrity, that's another level of the therapeutic order. And that's when I will often refer out to my physical medicine colleagues or my chiropractor or PT colleagues to get the body in proper alignment. Because if the body's not in proper alignment, the nervous system has an issue functioning well, and then all of the signals we're trying to send everywhere get a little bit distorted. Then after all those things have been established, do we have actual added interventions? And we start off with botanical and basically non-pharmaceutical. Botanical, vitamins, minerals, nutraceuticals, that type of thing. Next in order are pharmaceutical medications. And that typically tends to be where most conventional medicine starts. They start at the pharmaceutical. Some functional medicine doctors do some of the lower order things. Osteopathic doctors definitely try to correct structural integrity. And even just general conventional medicine doctors are starting to learn about the, base of the pyramid. But for the most part, they all start up at like step 7 out of 9 or 6 out of 8.
So how did we? Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Just a couple more things.
Yeah.
And then we have pretty toxic medications that we add in, like radiation therapy, and then after that, and chemotherapy, then is surgery. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of hierarchy or the therapeutic of order that I'm taught to follow, and I always start at the base.
Got it. I love it, and it makes a ton of sense. I think from my view, at least in my generation, people are realizing the importance of those base levels of health. And I know my own path, I don't exactly know what caused my initial, change in understanding, but just being naturally similar to you, attracted to more natural methods of healing and trying to actively avoid the pharmaceutical drugs has been something that I have done for years and years, and just coming across some of the, just firsthand seeing some of the negative effects, and also just having seeing some of the things online and other places. So my question is, how did we get into this situation? And I don't know if we can talk about the whole history of Western medicine and Eastern medicine and what happened, but why are there these ancient or older techniques of healing that are now resurfacing a bit, but that have been basically ignored by the mainstream medicine? And like why did that happen?
Yeah, I'm going to shift my seat real quick because the sun has moved on my back porch, and now I can't see without squinting.
Okay,
so hold on. I didn't think about this.
The sun moves. That's all right.
Okay, so that is a really kind of complicated question. I think how it all started probably was excitement with new medical technology. From what I have learned about the history of naturopathic medicine, we were kind of one of the oldest or the first real medical professions. The way that medical school is set up with, 4-year didactic schooling and then a residency and so on and so forth, the conventional medical doctors actually borrowed that model from naturopathic medicine back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And we were licensed all over the state, or all over, the country. And from what I've been taught, what really happened is right around the advent of vaccines and penicillin, which are, in naturopathic theory, penicillin at least is suppressive and sometimes very warranted, not as warranted as we are led to believe. But the American Medical Association really got a lot of funding and media attention with the advent of that type of medical technology, and also vaccines were happening right around that time too. And they just kind of blew up with all this excitement because penicillin was helping to save lives. Vaccines were helping to save lives. And they took that money and started to systematically, state by state, shut down other professions that disagreed with them because of greed and because of politics. And then you add into that everything that's happened with corporations and politics with big pharma, and you get a lot of resistance to anything that doesn't form to the new status quo. And that has been able to persist for about 100, 150 years, maybe 200 years is a little too old. But what has happened is people have realized after, 4 to 6 generations of this, conventional medicine is not traditional medicine. It is rather new medicine compared to the history of our species.
Right.
But
good to put that in perspective.
Doing this newer conventional medicine for several generations has actually left us being rather sick, and things aren't working. And people are starting to come back to the older ways that had been used for hundreds of years that were very, very effective. Um, and yeah, did that answer your question?
Absolutely, yeah. Makes a lot of sense, and I've seen it myself. I've got a bunch of questions around. I guess the first one is like, and it makes a lot of sense from my research and just like seeing the social attitudes towards naturopathic medicine, I think is maybe one thing I would ask you about. It's definitely shifting, but people will often, first of all, they don't even know, many people, the difference between like a naturopath and a naturopathic doctor. So maybe
yeah.
let's knock that one out really quick, because I explain this to folks once in a while.
Yeah. So, so what happened when our profession was knocked out about 100 years ago is there are people that still went and learned some of our foundational techniques and decided to call themselves naturopaths, which was fine at that time. But as we have started to gain licensure across the states again, we keep butting heads with these people that took like maybe a 1-year online course and now call themselves a naturopath. Sometimes they call themselves a naturopathic doctor, which I think is a completely unethical thing. Mm-hmm. And it really kind of confuses the general public. Well, but did you go to medical school? Or they said that they're a naturopath, they must have gone to medical school. So what I tell people is, if you hear that somebody is a naturopathic doctor, first of all, you always want to see a naturopathic doctor or naturopathic physician. That title, infers that that person went to a medical school. And then you ask them, oh, which medical school did you go to? And you can make sure it's accredited, right? Because in places where we don't have licensure, the term doctor is less protected. So people can call themselves doctors and really not have gone to a real medical school. In the state of Washington, if somebody is a naturopath but not a naturopathic doctor and they call themselves a naturopathic doctor, we can send a cease and desist letter to get them to take that off of their website. I think actually the term naturopath is protected too. So there is a clear difference.
And it's years of education and experience.
Years of education.
Not close.
Years and years of education, both didactic and hands-on. It includes an internship. Often naturopathic doctors have had a residency or some type of extra mentorship directly under another licensed doctor. Yeah, and awesome. My assumption is that once we have full licensure across the country, which we get closer and closer to every year, those other people that call themselves naturopaths are going to have to change their title.
Makes a lot of sense. So you're also my primary care physician. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but
you can say that. I can't say that.
I can I could spend a long time talking about some of the incredibly awesome things that have happened as a result of having you in my life and helping take care of my health. But the first thing that just stood out to me was my first visit was with you. I think it was an hour long, or at least 30 minutes long.
It was an hour.
Yeah, full hour. We talked about everything from my diet to sleep to relationships and work and everything. And contrast that with a visit to a normal doctor that I've been used to my entire life with my pediatrician. It's usually you wait for 15, 20 minutes in the room. Maybe the nurse comes in, but then the doctor comes in for 3 to 5 to 7 minutes, or maybe 10 minutes, and then they're gone.
And then they're gone.
It's very hard to really understand somebody's life in just 7 minutes. Here we've already been on the phone for half an hour and we're just starting to scratch the surface. So how do you approach, when you have someone for the first time, they come in, I have a couple questions on what you see as some of like the main culprits for what people are coming into you with. What are their needs? Why do people come see you in the first place? And then how you approach that first meeting. How do you start to assess people's health problems, and like how you kind of use the different questions and figure out like kind of how to help them. Just from a high level, I guess. Obviously you don't need, maybe an example or something could be great as well.
So people come see me for a plethora of reasons. The things that I do really well with treating, I tend to see more of, because, referrals. I see a lot of GI issues. I see a lot of autoimmune issues, and I see a lot of fatigue, stress, anxiety, depression. I feel like those four all run together. And then I also just see a lot of, I need a PCP. Can you help manage my prescriptions? Can you do my kids' pediatric visits, that kind of thing, which tend to not be problem centered. They tend to just be, let's make sure your blood pressure is okay once a year. As far as how I help people and determine kind of what things to focus on, that is the role of the initial consultation, and that's why it's an hour long. So whether or not, or regardless of whether someone's coming in to see me for IBS or for anxiety or for chronic allergies, I am asking them the same questions. I do a very thorough review of systems with everyone, and I will often say, I'm going to ask you a ton of yes or no questions. Most of these have nothing to do with why you're here, but we're just going to get a full picture. I ask everybody about diet, everybody about sleep, and their answers will often reveal what road we need to start walking down. Another thing, and this is another reason why my initial visits are an hour and all my follow-ups are 30 minutes, is we have this saying in my field that if you let the patient talk for long enough, they'll tell you exactly what's wrong and what they need. And that's true. That is absolutely true. So if I have somebody coming in to see me for chronic stress, and I'm just like, tell me about your stress and how it manifests. Where do you think it's coming from? And then I just let them talk for 10 minutes. I end up knowing at the end of that conversation what things I need to suggest to shift in their life to help them feel better. Mm-hmm. You guys have the answers. We're just here to show you the road to walk down, It
seems like that's kind of a theme in your practice in general, is just removing those obstacles and helping people find their own path to healing. And that's kind of the same thing with what I found in these interviews, is like, it's not about one path, like everyone has their own. So it's more finding what you're meant to do and what your calling is.
Exactly.
So there's a cool little parallel there. I'm gonna throw that in. Diet is a really big topic of conversation nowadays, and I'm sure being on the front lines of people asking you questions about diet, and it's such a large conversation. There's so much debate, even at top scientists disagree about what's the best diet and this and that. What do you say when someone asks you about how can I change my diet? How can I have a good diet? What do you start to say?
Well, I always say, well, what do you eat? And kind of take it from there. My favorite quote about the best diet for everyone comes from Michael Pollan, and that's eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And I think if everybody followed that, that doesn't mean everyone needs to be vegetarian or vegan. That doesn't mean everybody needs to be, on a keto diet or what have you. But really, when someone's saying, what can I do to help me be healthy? I ask them what they're looking for. What does health mean to you? Sometimes health means lots of energy. And then we work on blood sugar regulation, make sure they're getting enough protein, make sure they're eating enough calories. Most people don't. Some people say, okay, health to me is not having chronic sinusitis. And I go, okay, let's look at food intolerances then. Some people say health to me is losing, 10 pounds because I gained a lot of weight last year. I'm like, okay, let's look at exercise with the diet, make sure the diet's supporting the exercise, make sure that sugar isn't too high, and so on and so forth. It really comes down to what the patient views health as, and I sometimes will help focus that definition for them, and then using food as medicine to help them obtain that health goal.
I love it. Food is medicine. I haven't heard that one. I love it though. A lot of people just struggle with having a unhealthy relationship with eating, and how do you combat that? Like the mental side of changing your diet, eating less sugar, not turning to foods when you're anxious or tired or things like that. Because that's kind of like another layer of, on top of just what's good for you, then how do we actually manage our relationship with the food? Do you have any advice there?
Yeah, well, first, if they're having some quote unquote unhealthy eating patterns, I try to get to the root cause of that. So, and first and foremost, I never shame. We first, and I try not to say unhealthy eating, because that is such a judgment.
Yeah.
For some, and I'm telling you what I tell people in my office. For some people, eating that candy bar at the end of the day is your only source of sweetness and happiness and relaxation in your life. And I'm not taking that away from you right now. Let's let you eat all the sugar and chocolate you want while we fix why you're needing to go for that, right? Because the last thing I'm going to do is take away a coping mechanism when you have nowhere else to turn. So when people are saying I'm having the issue eating unhealthfully, et cetera, why? Why are you having that issue? What can we do to replace that eating pattern that's not working for you? It's not bad. It's just that it's not working for you, right? And one of my favorite ways of shifting, and I use that word a lot, shift. I don't change, I shift. One of my favorite techniques is just by adding extra things. You can have all the carbs you want. You can have that dessert if you want. I want you to add in a cup of vegetables with every lunch and dinner. Let's just add that in. Make sure you get that in. And the more you add in nutrition and add in hydration and add in exercise and add in protein, all of that other stuff starts to just kind of fall by the wayside. People aren't reaching for their sugar cravings or their alcohol as much or what have you. Their snacks that they don't really quote unquote need when they're feeling well emotionally, feeling good physically, feeling satiated between meals.
Awesome. That's great wisdom there for sure.
Because if you take away things, you're just punishing people, right?
Yeah.
Instead of just going to give you stuff until you don't want that other stuff.
Right. And I also kind of attach myself to this idea of like, we only have so much discipline. So you can be disciplined like in your work, in your relationships, you can be, wake up early, but you got to have some sort of, call it coping mechanism or something. We're all human. We shouldn't beat ourselves up over eating a donut or something like that.
One or two vices.
Yeah. You said it's all good for one or two vices. From here, I am going to scroll down. So sleep, after diet, I want to ask you about sleep. It's something that the science now is coming out in the last 4 or 5 years that sleep is much more important than we had previously thought. And there's this trend in the United States specifically, but you work hard, you sleep when you die, sleep is for the weak, all those types of phrases. I fell into the trap, along with many others, thinking that I need to sleep less in order to be more productive and more efficient with my time and things like that. In the Seattle area, there's a lot of people that are, high performers, people that work a lot of hours. How do you start to talk to those people about sleep, and what are your recommendations for sleep? Do you have anything that you see that's causing people to stay up too much? Like, talk to me about sleep.
Yeah. So first, I tell them that sleep's actually more important than food. When you think about all the things a human body needs to survive, we often forget about sleep, or we'll put it way down at the list. But I love to educate people. We can live, on average, roughly 3 minutes without oxygen, about 3 days without water, 11 days without sleep, 45 days without food. So sleep is number 3, right after water. We need,
Yeah. Wow.
We need sleep. It is so important for so many different reasons. And I talk a lot about that in my practice. The things I see really coming up against healthy sleep, there's a lot of just being on our devices too much. So I make sure everybody has their night shift thing turned on, their computer, on their phone, that type of thing. And again, it's, well, why can't you sleep, right? Some people are just up working too late, and then it's a lot of education and counseling around stepping away from work and creating healthy boundaries around work. Some people are that high performance type of personality, and I like to share one of my favorite stories about myself, about how one year in medical school, I made myself go to bed at 10:30 every single day, and that was the only quarter, and it was a very hard quarter, that I didn't have to study for a single exam because I just remembered everything during lecture, because I got those precious golden hours before midnight. Those are the most important hours of sleep, are the ones before midnight. Even if it's just a half an hour before midnight, it serves you so much better. Yeah, does that answer your question? Do you want me to go deeper?
You're definitely answering, starting to kind of talk about, I think it's such an interesting thing. Sleep is so important, of course. And I guess the question is, you just mentioned those hours before midnight. Do you weight them as more valuable than an extra half hour sleeping in the morning, and why?
Yeah, no, way more valuable. The way that our body, the advent of electricity and the artificial lighting at night has really messed with our brain's ability to rest and recuperate. Honestly, in my opinion, brain's ability to develop properly. We are meant, with how our cortisol levels in our bodies rise and fall throughout the day and evening, we are meant to go to sleep right after sunset and then wake up right at dawn. So even if you're getting 8 hours of sleep from midnight to 8 a.m., that sleep is not lining up with the circadian rhythm your body really wants to have. And if you can shift those 8 hours from 10 to 6, you're much more alert for the day ahead, which means you have less sugar cravings because you have less cortisol crashes. You tend to drink less caffeine. You can exercise with some more energy, have better recovery, all because you got adequate rest that wasn't fighting against your circadian rhythm, right? Mm-hmm. And I say this often, those hours before midnight are the most precious hours. I call them the golden hours of sleep, because if you can get some of those in and just wake up earlier, you will feel substantially better throughout your day. It might take a couple days or a week or so to adjust, but once you get used to it, there's not a patient that I have in my practice, unless they're like shift workers, that not one patient that comes back and complains about having an earlier bedtime.
It takes a little bit of discipline to go to bed, right? You have to start the process earlier. You have to just kind of mentally, it's 8 o'clock. Let's, start to turn those devices off. For me, I'm working on my computer until late hours of the night pretty often. So I'm constantly finding ways. For me, it's kind of just like a mental thing of just my level of like intensity and how I've been thinking. If I need at least like an hour to just wind down, like from what you said, working, or I like to listen to a podcast or something that's not super educational, something that's just kind of entertaining, and that's how I do it. How do you wind down? So I know, and we can talk a little bit about how you're handling this current situation, but your job is crazy busy some days, and obviously you have to take on a lot of other people's challenges. How do you go home at the end of the night and decompress? What are the tools you use?
Well, one of the main tools is I make sure that I am physically active frequently. And my exercising tends to happen first thing in the morning when I wake up, when cortisol levels are the highest. I have more energy then. So if I can get, good 3 or 4 days a weekend of some intense exercising, then that helps my sleep a lot. I'm able to relax a lot more, not be as restless as at night. So that's the main thing, exercise. And that's something I address in my practice all the time when people are having sleep issues. Because sometimes people can't sleep because they have too much pent up energy. All they've been doing all day is sitting on their butts looking at the screen,
and
right?
They might be tired like mentally, but they're not, their body still physically.
You gotta get out that physical energy. I have a nighttime ritual where I make a cup of tea, herbal tea that has some relaxing herbs. I sometimes don't even drink but 1 or 2 sips, but just that ritual, that routine is a way for me to clue my body in to the fact that that sleep is coming around the corner. And keeping on a routine like that can be really beneficial for helping one to wind down. Had a really great. Sometimes I come home and I have a glass of scotch to help me relax, and I don't think things like that are necessarily terrible. Yeah. You have to, like I said, everyone's allowed some vices, a little bit of fun in their life, but you need to make sure that your stress isn't so high to where you can't fully let go of it. I like to tell people you need to leave your work at work. Right? You need to try to establish some type of boundary. And if you can't, or if stress is, I have some patients, they won't have a glass of wine when they get home from work. They have half the bottle. And I go, okay, maybe it's time to get a counselor to talk about what's amping you up to the point where you need like actual sedation to help you relax. Right? It's all about checking in with yourself. And there have been times, I struggle with this myself frequently, where I want to stay up and watch that other episode of whatever I'm binging on Netflix, or I want to like be on my computer doing my research for a patient until like 2 a.m. And I just tell myself, you're going to feel awful in the morning. There's a phrase I use: when you love and care for yourself enough, you will make those harder choices to set your future self up for success instead of your present self up for their desire, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Because you want to take care of yourself. And I think that when people start in the beginning, it can be a difficult thing to switch one's lifestyle around. But once you have some experience with, this is what it feels like when I go to bed at 11 or 10:30, I feel awesome. Once you do that enough times in a row, and then you revert back to your old ways and you feel awful and you're dragging your feet throughout the whole day, it's easier to make that more healthy decision, right? Because you're going to feel better. And if you still choose to make the decision that's going to make you feel crappy, then that's something we need to focus on. Well, why? What's happening in your life where you're needing to do escaping behaviors or so on and so forth? We can address that. So instead of telling you not to do that because that's bad, let's lean into that to see what's going on.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I also, do you want to slide a little bit? The sun's starting to get in your eyes again.
This sun.
I don't know how much more time you have, but I definitely just want to ask you a couple more questions if you have another 10 minutes or so. Obviously, you mentioned changing lifestyles, and that naturally made me think everyone's lifestyle just changed a lot recently with the pandemic and virus. Mm-hmm. What are you advising people to do to try and keep some of that structure or take care of themselves? It's more important than ever. And especially given the situation where a lot of people are at home in one space all the time, or around the same people all the time, I find it's really nice to get away and be on my own and clear my head. So what are you telling folks to that end?
So I'm first telling them to have some allowance for themselves for their stress and their anxiety and their quote unquote lack of discipline. People keep talking, I just don't have the discipline to blah, blah, blah. I say, accept that. Let's all have some grace with ourselves right now. We are in an unprecedented time. Mm-hmm. There's a ton of stress. It's nobody knows what's going to happen. We are all in the middle of a hugely emotionally traumatic event right now. And we need to just be okay with not being okay. So if you're not exercising 2 hours a day or cooking all your meals, or, if you're going for that whole box of Girl Scout cookies, fine. I'm allowing my patients to do that. Because this right now is not the time for us to be mean to ourselves, right? I mean, no time is the time for us to be mean to ourselves, but especially right now, we just need to be gentle and just to be aware that this is really hard and there are a lot of triggers happening every day for people, and we're going to get through it, but we need to get through it with caring heart. I'm saying to people, at the very least, get outside. Well, at the very least, I want you to wake up and have a shower every day. I want you to get outside for 30 to 60 minutes every day minimum. After that, I don't care what you do. I don't care if we were on this weight loss program and then now you've gained 20 pounds. I don't care. I don't care if you were, doing really well with cooking at home every single day and now you've been doing more takeout because you just can't handle it. Like, really, if you want to start, I got to have this one patient who's been working on cutting down alcohol a little bit. She's not an alcoholic, but she was just partying a little too much. And Dr. Pinkleton, I like had a beer at 6 o'clock and normally I wait. I'm like, girl, I don't care. I was like, are you feeling okay in the morning? Did you just have 2 that day? That's fine. Like, we're all going to get through this the way that we do. We're going to really lean on our coping mechanisms and just be okay with that, because we have to understand that right now is not the time to implement new changes into our life. That whole be super productive and come out of this a changed person is a reflection of our hugely traumatic capitalistic mental or capitalistic society and not at all healthy. But getting outside and moving your body every day for 30 to 60 minutes is going to help your body feel better. It's going to help your joints feel better. It's going to help your low back feel better. It will help your sleep. It will help to calm your nervous system down so that you can handle a little bit of this trauma. I'm not even going to say process it, because we can't process it. We're in the middle of it. We're going to process it once we're through with this. And keeping a slight routine with making sure you're bathing yourself, making sure you're eating 3 meals a day, that type of thing. So it's different than what some of my colleagues are like, let's use this time to get into some real healthy habits. And I just don't think that that's feasible for many people right now.
I think your message makes a lot of sense. And I think there's so much value in just accepting yourself for where you're at. And like you said, once you start to give yourself that earlier night of sleep and you start to feel the benefits, you're more naturally going to go and do those things rather than see it like many people do as I have to put so much discipline, and it's like willpower. You only have so much of it. So if you spend it all on going to sleep an hour earlier and you're freaked out about that, that's really some good advice there. And of course, everyone receives messages differently and people are at different points in their lives. But I think right now specifically is at a time where there's so much uncertainty that people, especially financial uncertainty, people's job securities, a lot of folks are struggling with that. So that's great that you're advising folks to be gentle with themselves. I think that's a great message. So I guess we talked just for a couple minutes before the conversation about how your practice is changing, but do you want to just give me a little repeat on that? And then I have some questions about going forward. Are you going to be focusing more on telemedicine and thinking that that's a more effective way than having folks drive in and see you, or are you going to go back to the way it was? And give me kind of the high level on how things have changed.
Yeah, so my practice is still fairly steady. There was a little dip and now it's kind of picking back up. We'll see what the next couple of weeks look like. About 90% of my practice, maybe 95, is telemedicine right now. I do quite a bit of primary care. So I'm averaging 1 or 2 patients a day coming in for their well child exams or blood pressure check, or it's like peak allergy season here, so I'm doing a lot of allergy testing with my patients. And there are things that some people need face-to-face visits with, and we take the appropriate measures, wear masks, disinfect before and after, the whole 9. I'm digging the telemedicine stuff. With Seattle having the traffic patterns that it has, I think that, I've been telling my patients when we're booking, follow up in a month. You can, if we're out of this quarantine time mid-May, you're welcome to come in. If you're finding telemedicine working way better for you and your schedule, I am more than happy to do that as well. Insurance is covering these telemedicine appointments, rightfully so. It makes no sense for them to not cover if you don't need to do physical exam. So I'm hoping that 50% stays telemedicine once all of this is through. I think it's way better for time management, way better on the environment. And, Also, it's more economical. You're not paying for gas. And, I really like it. I like being able to just have that more instant access with a patient instead of having them like getting stuck in traffic and being 10 minutes late for the appointment or what have you, know?
And where your office is not the easiest to get to.
It depends on the neighborhood you're in.
Yeah.
My patients that live in South Seattle, it's very easy. They just run up MLK and then they're right there. But for the patients that are in like West Seattle or North Seattle, it's they're appreciating having telemedicine. And to be honest, I was doing telemedicine way before this started. I have patients that live on Vashon Island and Whidbey Island, and we've been doing this like right from the get-go of them establishing care with me. So I was fortunate in not having to really have any learning curve jumping on the telemedicine bandwagon. I was already there and just kind of ramped it up.
Yeah. Are you losing anything? Are you missing? Is there an element of being in the presence with somebody that you're not maybe you might not catch something that they say or how they're feeling?
Not, I don't think so. I think that I have a pretty good sense of people and, maybe intuition, if you will. So when I'm speaking to somebody and I can see their face and I can see their facial expressions or their body movement, I can get a sense of what might be going on deeper that they might not be talking to me about and still prod them a little if I need to. I do love seeing people face to face, and we are very social creatures, and I think that that's something to be aware of. And that's another reason why this time is so hard for us, because we can't reach out to our social network like we normally do in the same way. But I don't think anything I don't think telemedicine is detrimental in any way. It can be a little bit of sometimes I like to check a quick BP or get a weight check or take someone's pulse, or they're talking about feeling a certain way and I want to see the temperature of their skin. Is it clammy? How's their circulation doing? I can't do that myself. I can ask them questions though, and they can do the physical exam for me and report back what they're feeling. So there is that, so that can be a little bit tough, because sometimes people will call them doorknob confessions. We call them that in my profession, where right when the visit's ending, they'll be like, oh, that's one other thing.
I feel like I've done that to you before.
And I can't do that. But the way around that is, well, we can't talk. It's the end of our visit and I need a physical exam for that. So can you come in tomorrow or next week so I can see you face to face?
So it's not a problem, because if you really needed them to come in, they come in, and exactly. Sounds like it's just more efficiency.
We're an essential business, open for those essential needs. And if I need to look in someone's ears or listen to their heart, they're more than willing, or they're more than welcome to come in and have that done.
Well, you've helped me a ton, and I didn't ask too many specific questions around like how to improve your health, but I would absolutely direct anyone who does want to has a health problem or wants to pursue improving their health to talk to you. So I'll put maybe your email or not email, but your website or something in the description to the podcast. You've helped me with several different things. One was the inflammation in my diet. The food that I was eating was causing inflammation. I've told this story multiple times, but I actually was having so much pain in my joints that I couldn't even ski. My knees would hurt so much. I'd have so much pressure in my joints, my hips and my knees. And then we went through the process of eliminating some foods from my diet. Still, I've started to pick some of those back up a little bit, but just being aware of which foods actually cause inflammation to increase in our diet more than others was super valuable. And then the second time was when I was in Nepal and I was sick with mono, and you were there to guide me towards actually it was in Bangkok, and I went into a random little apothecary, herbal place, and the woman there got me set up with your advice. So I wanted to express my gratitude for helping me through those two situations. And
well, you're very welcome.
It was, I think I was emailing you from Bangkok, like, doctor, what do I do? Like, should I continue this trip or should I try and get a flight home? I was so sick, I didn't know what to do. So actually having someone like you in my corner just gives me so much more confidence that I'm making the right decisions. And I think in this current situation that people are so uncertain, it's nice to have someone like you around. And I think the value of having a naturopathic primary care physician is huge compared to someone that maybe only has a few minutes to see you, and being able to access your doctor is awesome. So that's my
Well, you're
spiel.
very welcome. I love that my profession allows me, and the way I've set up my practice allows me to be able to offer that, because I think that it's so important. And, you know, if you only have 5 to 10 minutes with somebody, you can't really talk to them about why they need to do the things you're suggesting. And so compliance doesn't really happen as often, and then efficacy of your treatment plan starts to go down, right? But being able to be available, be on call. I kind of got a kick. I was helping you out while you were in Nepal.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Cool that you were able to text me, because you know, I don't want people to suffer, and the thought of you being over there miserable and you were so excited to go.
Still had a great time, but I will say I came back from that trip and I was really sick for a couple weeks, just because I pushed myself too hard before the trip. I was not sleeping enough, trying to finish some work, and then I went on the trip. Didn't obviously sleep well when you're traveling, and
then the
I
altitude.
learned firsthand for the first time in my life the importance of actually taking care of your health, because you can actually get really sick if you don't. So if you kind of burn the wick at both ends too long. So that was my hard life learned lesson. But the last question that I have been asking most every interview I've done is, what advice would you give to yourself at the age of 18? If you could whisper in your ear and give yourself a little bit of wisdom from today. And
Oh goodness. Okay. Well, I kind of have two. One would be when you get to college, pay a little more attention to your classes, because you're going to miss being able to just focus on cool philosophy classes. I had the coolest undergrad degree and amazing department. And I was, you know, some 19-year-old kid not paying attention as much as I wish I had. But that aside, you know, don't be afraid to do the unconventional things, make the decisions that go against the mainstream, and to just follow your heart, because that's what's going to lead to happiness.
Well said. Well said. I love it. I think that's a great place to let you go, end the conversation. The sun is now on your head again. It looks like we've been talking for an hour now. But Doctor, thank you so much for sharing these stories and knowledge, and I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This was really great.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that we were able to make it happen. As the highlight of my week for sure. Now I'm going to go back to the editing cave and be working away and still thinking about this conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, have a good day.
All right. Yeah, we'll talk to you very soon.
Okay, bye.
Take care.